Hi friends, welcome to the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. This is Lauren Taylor and I'm happy to have you here for a new crafty video. I'm going to be using products from the Magic Collection from Miss Ink Stamps. I have stamped this baddie from the Baddies stamp set and colored her in and used the coordinating die. I'm also going to be using the Eieio frame die set, the magical newspaper background stamp set, the dark alley stamp set, and I'm going to bring in a couple more products that I will talk about later on. I've trimmed a piece of gray cardstock down to a little bit larger than A2. I wasn't sure what size die I was going to use yet at the time of stamping, so I wanted it to be bigger than A2. And I'm going to stamp the large image from the dark alley stamp set that has the buildings that would be from the dark alley from the Magic Collection. I'm going to be using some Memento Tuxedo black ink. It's a little bit of an old ink pad, so I'm going to stamp it a couple times using my Misty and a pressure tool to get a nice clean image. And the reason why I wanted to use Memento is that it dries pretty quickly, and when I do some ink blending, it won't smear. So I wanted to add a little bit more to the ground of my image. So I brought in the perspective floor stencil. I feel like every video I do for Miss Ink Stamps, I use this stencil. It's so versatile and so good. I love using it. And I'm going to use the smaller of the rectangle dies that does not have any stitching detail on it. And I'm going to die cut out the dark alley image that I stamped again on that gray cardstock. I'm going to stamp the image again, this time on some low tack tape because I want to make a mask to go on my buildings so I can add that perspective floor stencil underneath the buildings where the floor or the ground is in this scene. So I just added a little bit of ink to the bottom of that image, and then I'm going to use some scissors and just fussy cut it out, cutting right on the line to be able to have a nice mask for the bottom of these buildings. And once that's done, I'll go ahead and line that up onto the stamped image on the gray cardstock. Again, this will allow me to use my stencil, and it will just color in or just stencil in that bottom portion of the image and not get it into my buildings. I'm going to use the bottom of the different floors, a little bit more of the rectangular bricks, and I'm bringing in pumice stone distress ink and a blending brush. This is a new ink pad. I just opened it and my goodness, it was a very juicy ink pad, so I had a ton of ink on my brush. So it is a bit of a dark, nicely stenciled, but a bit of a dark brick that I wasn't necessarily going to go for, but we're going to lean into it. It is a dark alley, so I think, darker ink is good. Once I finish with that stenciling, I remove the mask and I'm going to use the excess ink on my blending brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit here and there, but just really darken the edges of this background. I want to create a very tone on tone look on this gray cardstock. So I have the light gray cardstock, the black ink, and the darker gray of the stenciling and the vignette look around the edges of the card. And we're going to bring in some black re-inker just so I can put a little bit of black paint or ink onto my glass board. I added some water to water it down and make it so I can splatter with a paintbrush. Then after that was dry, I brought in some white splatter paint, added some water, and splattered that on the background as well. I'll go ahead and set that aside to dry, but again, really liking this tone on tone look. So we're going to carry that over into our next background stamp. And I'm going to use the largest of the rectangles from this stamp set, and that is going to be A2 in size with some green cardstock. I'll go ahead and cut that out, and I'm going to use the magical newspaper background stamp for this background. I'm going to use my Misty here, but I'm also going to use a low tack kind of plastic sheet here. That this one particular one I am going to it fits perfectly inside my Misty, so I'm going to use that to keep my green piece of cardstock in place while I ink up the newspaper. For this, again, going with the tone on tone, I'm using Cottage Ivy Memento ink because it will dry pretty quickly, and I'll be able to bring in some distress ink and be able to ink blend without, ruining any of my stamped images. It won't blur. You'll still be able to read what is written on the newspaper stamp on this background. I didn't worry about inking up the middle because you're not going to see it. I'm going to layer it behind my gray panel. So now that my newspaper print is on the background, I'm going to grab again distress ink, this time in Rustic Wilderness, and I'm going to immediately get my finger right into the ink. And just like I did with the gray background, I'm going to distress all four edges, going really heavy against the edge of the cardstock and then letting it fade out into towards the center of the panel. Now I'm going to add a little bit of splatter, but this time I wanted to bring in something with a little bit of shine. So I'm going to use the Tree Lot Distressed Mica Stain, and I'm not even going to spray it. I'm just going to pull out the top and just use the straw portion of the sprayer to flick on or splatter on that to the background. I'm going to use my cloth here just to pick up the excess ink because I just want that green shimmer to be in the background. I don't need really dark, intense splatter blobs on this panel. I just wanted that little bit of subtle shine on the background. I love the tone on tone of the gray with the tone on tone of the green, and so that's going to be the perfect background for this baddie. So now I wanted to stamp a sentiment. I'm going to use a sentiment from the Dark Alley stamp set that says, "I solemnly swear I curse a lot." I think that's so funny. I actually saw this as a bumper sticker actually the day that I made this card, and I was like, I am going to use that sentiment for my project today for Miss Ink. So I wanted to stamp it directly onto the background, which I did. I used some Nocturne VersaFine Clear ink, but it just was too busy. I didn't feel like you could see it on the background. So I went ahead and added a little bit more of that pumice stone ink to the gray cardstock so it would match the background. And I stamped it again in the Nocturne VersaFine Clear ink, and I'm just going to fussy cut it out. And that way it will blend in with the background like I intended for it to be, but there wouldn't be the stamped image of the dark alley buildings, and it will pop up, and I feel like you can actually read that better. So now I have all of my elements that I wanted to add onto the card. So let's start layering everything together. I'm going to grab my tape runner and I'm going to add adhesive to the back of the gray panel. And I'm going to adhere this to the center of the green panel. Now I have this card, this T ruler, perfect for card makers, and actually worked out that I was able to use one of the features of this ruler to be able to get this centered, but you could just use a grid or just eyeball it and get that centered onto the green panel. After that, I'm going to add foam adhesive behind my sentiment, and I'm going to pop that up right on top of where I originally stamped the sentiment. I'm going to use that T-square ruler again and make sure it looks centered. Luckily, I fussy cut it larger than the sentiment, giving it that bubble cut, so I was able to just cover the original stamp of my sentiment just fine. I added foam adhesive to my baddie, and I'm going to pop her up onto the card as well. Now that my card front is all assembled, I have a top folding card base. It is A2 in size, which is 4¼ by 5½ when it's folded. And I'll use my tape runner to add adhesive to the back side of the green panel and attach that to my card base. I like to start at one of the corners of the scored edge of the card, so that way if something doesn't line up perfectly, I can always trim down the card base. I felt like it was missing a little something, so I'm going to grab one of the different stars from the Magic Star die set. It's a little bundle of 3, and I die cut it out twice out of some black ink, and I'm going to put one set of each of them into the top left corner and the bottom right corner. That's how I tend to add embellishments. Like I go from one corner to the opposite corner, and that way it just kind of creates like a guide for your eyes to follow across the card. And I felt like that just added a little bit more and finished off the look. Here you can see a final look at how this tone-on-tone baddie card turned out. I love the sentiment, I love this baddie, and again, love the colors. I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial using the Magic Collection from Miss Ink Stamps. You can find the supplies that I used down below in the description box, but make sure you check out even more inspiration from the Miss Ink Stamps YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Bye!